Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're going to work on a reel today that happens to be my personal reel. Every now and then I actually do get to tune them up. Striped bass season just opened up here in the Northeast, and I'm not going to use this reel, but it was a good time for me to pick that reel and also pick one that's been sitting around a while, the GS20, which I'll do in a separate video. But we're going to work on the Black Gold BG13. It was made in Japan. It's a 3-ball bearing reel. I use this for inshore fishing. I enjoy it. It's working fine. I don't expect any issues in the tune-up, but I thought I would take you through how to take this reel apart, how to service it, and how to put it back together again, getting it ready for the season. This is a good time of year. We're into the point where the weather is about to change, and it's always a good time when you have a few spare minutes, which I do today, to make sure that your own tackle is all tuned up and ready to go for the forthcoming season. There's kind of nothing worse than finding yourself getting alerted that the run is on, and you go to grab a reel and something's not working with it, or it's not working up to spec. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to remove the exterior pieces. So the first thing is kind of taking the handle off, and you take the handle off in a clockwise manner. It's a screw-in handle. And I just heard a little chirp there, so we're going to just put a little bit of oil on that. It's been sitting on a rod for a while. I did remove the line from my reel, as I recommend everybody do. And I recommend that you also wear a protective glove. And as you're taking the pieces and parts off, I recommend a parts tray. And that's nothing more than the bottom of a milk jug, but it serves its purposes. There's 3 case screws to the lower part of this reel, so we're going to take those off. And we're just going to get inside. We're going to make sure that it's appropriately greased, that it's cleaned up. If there's anything that is coagulated or dirty or whatever, we're going to make sure all of that stuff gets done. And as you might expect, I do try to take pretty good care of my own reels. I don't want to have a fish get away on me that I blame on old line or the failure to keep a reel maintained and have something break on me. I mean, mechanical pieces and parts will break from time to time. It's not a fault of anybody, but the more you can do to keep the reel serviced, the less likely it is that something is going to break. Alrighty, just I get this last screw out here. A little bit of difficulty with that one. I don't remember it being messed up, but it looks like it needs a little bit bigger. There we go. Had the wrong size screwdriver blade in here. So while I'm doing this, I want to take the opportunity to thank our first responders and essential personnel. Particular shout out to law enforcement, to EMTs, to fire, to the ER and hospital workers, to anybody involved in medical, whether it's long-term nursing home facilities or the like, and teachers who have been putting in an awful lot of hours doing some crazy things to try and keep our kids educated as they work remote and do other things to kind of help them stay safe from the pandemic. Thank you to all of you that are helping us get that done. All right, the case should come off now. There's just 3 pieces on that. Pretty straightforward design. This has 3 ball bearings. One of the things I'm going to do is just use some cleaner. I use Penn's rod and reel cleaner, and I'm just going to use that to take off some of the fish scales and side plate grease and the like that's kind of got on there. I try to hose my reels down after I use them each time. If I go into the surf, I like to just take the reel and sit it in a bucket of fresh water when I get back, and just let the fresh water kind of flush out the salt and the micro sands and things like that. But in this case, seems to be a little bit that was hiding behind the handle. We have a bearing on here, so let's get that off. We have a Crosswind Block Arm. Notice the position on this one. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures along the way if you're wondering, so that when you go to reinstall, you know where to find the orientation. So for example, it's very easy on the reinstall of this. Let's just pull that out. It's very easy to put it on reverse. And I've had people do that, and then what happens is they either find that they have a problem with the extension on the axle shaft, or they're bumping into something. So take that picture before you get too far along in the servicing part, so that you know that it seats this way when you go to reinstall. Just cleaning up that bearing. There's a little bit of debris on that, so let's get that off. This is it's a 4-ball bearing reel. I believe the 4th bearing is in the handle. Not sure. Going to give that a good drink of oil. And I service this on an annual basis, and I usually do it right about now, because I like to make sure that I'm ready for the season to start. And quite honestly, it's been busy in the shop. I haven't had a chance to get around to it, but I did today, and that's why we're doing that. We're going to remove the screw from the crosswind block. I'm going to put that into my parts tray so I don't lose that. It's a small screw. I'm going to hold on the stud from that crosswind arm, and I'll be able to pull up my axle shaft. And then I can take my crosswind block itself and put that into the parts tray as well. With that done, I can remove the main gear, and that's got another bearing on the back of it. And there you go. I have some dried grease on the back of that from last season, I guess, when it was seated. It's always interesting too. You can tell how I laid the reel, because all the grease is coagulated to the bottom. Quick shot of some penetrating oil will help loosen that up. And a Q-tip will help me clean it out of there. This is something you're going to find all the time when you go to clean a reel, that the grease is kind of sat in the side bowl of the reel, that indentation there behind the teeth, and that's just because of the force. I guess it's eccentric force or concentric or whatever the term is. I'm not sure, but what happens is when you put it into the teeth and it spins, it pushes it towards the center, and that's kind of where it gathers. I'm going to use a soft brush here just to clean the teeth before I reapply new greases and oils. As you can tell, I try to keep my reels clean, and I do that on an annual basis, so there's not a lot of dirt and debris and stuff in there. So I just want to clean that one little channel out. I do the same thing here. I got my second bearing is sitting here, so I'm going to go ahead and oil that. So this reel is a 30 size reel. Daiwa has some really funky ways of characterizing. This is the BG13. This is a bigger one, the GS20, but that's not a 20 size reel by any stretch of the imagination. That's a 50 size reel, and I use that one more on the salt water, and you can see that there's an awful lot of debris on that one that needs to be cleaned as well. It looks like a 12mm nut. I'm just going to use a tool. This comes off in a counterclockwise fashion, so let's go ahead and do that. I break it, then I like to just take it off by hand. I'm going to take my pieces that are on my table at the moment, the main gear and that other bearing. I'm going to put that aside for a moment. The rotor nut. And we should just be able to remove that. And then you can see how this works from an override anti-reverse. You have a swing collar on this one. It's got a spring. And that spring, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a spring here, and it lodges in this little slot in that carrier there. So you can pick the whole thing up just like that. Note when you take it off that the arm is facing left. Put that into your parts tray. Take the click ratchet. Note the way that the click ratchet is oriented. The teeth are kind of coming at you as opposed to going away from you. Take that off, and I think we're probably going to wind up taking off this anti-reverse dog to get the bearing out, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to put the other pieces and parts in here. Let's grab a screwdriver then and get that anti-reverse dog off. Notice the way that it sits. Take pictures so that when you go to reinstall, you know how that goes. Again, I'm just going to leave this whole assembly in place. That way it tends to be easier to do. We'll come back then and we'll finish this screw removal here. I've got that towel under here just to give you a better look at what's going on. But I've got the 2 screws, and I've got the anti-reverse dog and the like, and we should just be able to pull up that assembly. I knew that would be easy because it was easy the last time I did this. There's a collar that goes on top of the bearing. There's a bearing, and there's a shaft, and you can tell this shaft is pretty clean. I'm going to do the same thing with this shaft here. I'm going to use that soft bristle brush to clean out any old grease. There isn't any grease in there. We saw that around that main shaft. That's probably what has been happening there. And this is only tarnish on there now. So I'm going to grab my fishing reel grease. I use Penn Precision reel grease. And we're going to kind of lather that up pretty good there. I like these reels a lot. They're nothing fancy. They're very dependable, and they have stood the test of time. I've had this one for several years now, and it's never let me down. So it's a good reason why you can like a reel. I'm going to use that fishing reel grease again to give that bearing a drink of oil there. I'm going to just let that sit in for a moment. Again, my case is clean. That's not always what you'll find when you open up a reel, but I'm just going to take the opportunity here to just clean that internals there. And then we can go ahead and put this back on. Know that little collar came there. If you weren't paying attention, I'd hope you take pictures along the way. This one's pretty easy because it's symmetrical, but there is a flat side that mounts so that you can get the clearance you need on the anti-reverse override. And then let's go ahead and grab these. Get these back in. Just putting a little bit of grease onto my screwdriver to hold that while I try to align these, put them in place. Alright, that's one down. Let's do the other here. Those of you that watch the videos know me and little screws, and it's probably time for you to go get a cup of coffee. But I will get this one done. Okay, I'll wipe down that anti-reverse dog. This one sits like that, and we had this wire mechanism coming in from the top like this, and that whole thing sits this way. Okay, once you got that started, go ahead and finish it up. Now there's a shoulder on that screw, so sometimes you have to kind of work it around to make sure that it seats properly. Alright, we're good, right? Yep, we have our override function. We have that little lever piece there. And now we can go ahead and put the 2 pieces of the assembly that's going to make this work. Remember, we said that those teeth are coming at you, so those come in next. Make sure that you see the balance, and make sure that it has when the override's there, that it's a flat mesh like that, so that it's even. And we had our little eccentric spring, so you want to get that over the one piece and then mesh into that hole. And now when you turn this, you should see turn your handle, you're spinning, and as you back it off, I have to hold my piece down. Okay, with that installed then, the rotor and everything is clean. You can put a drop of oil underneath here, just where that trip lever is going to come. When I work this one, I like to flip the bail manually, but that's just me. You don't have to. You can trigger it by yourself. Then we'll grab the tie down nut, start that by hand. I like to make sure that I tighten it down as much as I can by hand before I go to a wrench. That way I know that I'm not cross-stripping it. It's a good time. There's a little bit of debris on the inside here, so let's go ahead and clean that out. Both sides of that channel have a little bit of that. It's a good time to reach that. And then give it a spin, make sure it's working properly. And then it's always good to check to make sure your anti-reverse is working, and it is because it's stopping. Two more things, just a drop of oil on both sides where the bail works. You don't have to take bails apart unless they're not working. This one's working as it should. And then we can come back over here. So we've got our bearings have been oiled and kind of sitting there. We're going to go ahead and put that in next. Got one in the side case there. Once you've put the bearing back in, you can grab your grease and put a little bit of grease into the slot. And then we're going to go ahead and install the axle shaft and the main gear. Now this one has clearance, so you can put the axle shaft in first, but let's get this set properly. So this has an orientation where it has the rounded corner, kind of matches with the case, like that. And if you don't remember that, that's a good time to go back to your pictures and check. And then what I did off camera was I took the spool out of the shaft and I cleaned the shaft. And now we're going to put the spool back in. And that meshes with the, the axle shaft. That's going to mesh with the crosswind block. And we can get the screw to go back in there. So that's how it's set here. Push down on the axle shaft. Now we can put the main gear in. We've greased the main gear. Just set that back in. Take our crosswind arm next. That seats on the stud of the crosswind block. Align that for your piece. And there's a little copper ring I didn't mention before, but that's a retention ring for this crosswind arm. So make sure that that's on top of it. Give it a spin, make sure it's working right. It is. So we can close this case up now. We'll take our case and our last bearing. We've given that plenty of oil. When you do this, it's easy enough to put the bearing into the case, put the case back on. Hear that snap, it's always a good thing. And then we'll go up top, we'll make sure that my spool assembly is in good condition. And then wait for that first call that says the run is on. Let's go get them. Alright, that's one. These are in a triangular pattern, doesn't matter which way you tighten them up. Just make sure they're tight. So the annual cleanup is really about doing just what we did there. Taking it off, inspecting the pieces and parts, getting rid of the old grease like we did on the main gear, putting all new fresh greases and oils like the bearings and the gears that we took, getting them all ready to work properly, including the bail assembly. And then you can rest assured as you put it on with new line, and I recommend changing the line every year when you put it on with the new line, that when you go fishing, if you lose a fish, you're not going to blame it on the reel. I'm going to take that handle at this point, put that back on as well. Well, the knob isn't knocking around anymore because we did put the oil on that where we heard the squeak. Yep, we're working beautifully with that. Let's come over to the spool. This is why I pulled the spool off. I noticed when I was working with the axle shaft that I do have some grease and the like that's spilled out of there, so I want to make sure that I cleaned that off before I went too much further. And I use a series of paper towels and and cotton swabs and the like, just to clean up any residual stuff that may be on there. Not quite sure if I remember what grease I used on that, but at any rate, it's all cleaned up there. I think I used the pen blue grease that I've been using. I've used that for a few years now. All right, and then we just need to pull the top off of this star adjuster. Now, this one has a quick change spool. You don't have to pull that off if you're happy with the way that you preset these. If you're not happy with it, of course, you can do that. I'm going to push this through because there was a little bit more grease lying underneath there. Get it off the... And then there's a retention ring on the drag washers, so let's go ahead and take that off. I use a pick, and I also hold my hand there because this is a spring and it will shoot. I work the pick in. There's two indents here that are set up for the eared washer on the drag set, but they are perfect for putting in the light. And in this case, previously I did grease these. The Teflon, they don't require the grease. But what you want to do at this point is you want to just separate them, make sure that there's no damage to the washers, and that everything is clean inside the cavity there. So let's just use that paper towel again to make sure that that's clean. You need to reach some of the harder parts, use that cotton swab, and just reassemble. This was about a visual check more than anything else. There's two round washers and one that has points on it. The one that's on points on it is called a eared washer. That always goes in the middle. Those were the two slots that we used to kind of pry that C-clip away. Put the alternating hard washers and soft washers back in there, and then we can reinstall the clip, put the spool on, and give it a final test. Work that in. There's a slot there to make sure that that hold down ring gets in the slot, which is what it's doing. Come in from underneath with this one. Make sure that it seats all the way. And as I mentioned, we have a preset on this one, so you don't need to remove the tensioner to remove the spool, and that's good because if you have the right drag set, then you don't have to disturb your settings on the reel with that. Alright, I'm going to just use my cleaner while I have this off. Make that bright and shiny on the interior. Put some new line on this later, and this one's going to be ready to go. So, took advantage of a little bit of downtime here to get my own reel up and running. We're good there. We're ready. So this is the Daiwa BG13. I hope you've enjoyed the video. And if you want to see more of these, please subscribe. If you do subscribe, please hit the notification button. If you like the video, please indicate that. If you have any questions about this reel or any other reel, then please leave them in the comments section. I do try to answer all questions that I receive. And if you have a reel that needs to be serviced and you're interested in having me work on that for you, then please contact me by email on the business card that follows. And finally, if you're interested in seeing that GS20, stand by. I'm going to be doing one of those videos in the near future. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.